Hi, everyone. Hope everyone is doing well. This is the Canadian Foreign Policy Hour. I'm Eve Engler coming to you from Jojage, which has long been a meeting place of various First Nations, otherwise known as Montreal. Just getting a few technical things going here. I hope it's nice. It's very hot here. Montreal, just getting a few technical things going here. So, there's been many developments in Canadian foreign policy, so I'll get right to it. There's this piece that was shared by Rights Action. US-backed Canadian mine in Guatemala threatens water supply for millions. Activists vow to fight the Cerro Blanco mine, which threatens a water supply for millions in Guatemala and El Salvador. The mine was opposed by 88% of the community that voted in a referendum a little while back, and the U.S. Embassy has gone to bat for this Canadian mining company. Canada Files has a piece about a Canadian mine in Ghana and the Bogosa Prestea communities, which has been opposed by communities and caused ecological damage there. And this is, of course, this is a constant theme in Canadian mining companies causing abuses all around the world with their mining operations. In Haiti, the Gary Conille was appointed a prime minister, and that is interesting for a few reasons. He was the first prime minister for Michel Martelly. He was somebody who was really Hillary Clinton's guy. They, of course, are the main players in installing Martelly back in 2011 and after the earthquake. And so he's becoming prime minister. He was in Miami. So as the Haiti Information Project pointed out, he flew back from Miami to become prime minister. That's not a very good omen. That hasn't been living in Haiti. And this is all preparing the groundwork for the Kenyan mission in the country, which Canada's been backing. On China, Andrew Coyne had a piece in the Globe and Mail titled "Free Trade with Our Friends, Absolutely, with Our Enemies, Not So Much." And Andrew Coyne says, but we do not want to enrich China. Indeed, so grave a threat has China become that we should perhaps wish that China were poorer rather than richer, even if it means making ourselves a little poorer in the process. And so he's stating really clearly, which has been kind of the underlying tone, of course, that we want China to be poorer because we see China as a threat, and we're willing to be poorer. Canada's willing to be poorer. This is somebody who claims to be all about, GDP and capitalism and stuff like that. But he's stating explicitly it's fine if Canada's a bit poorer so long as we can make China poorer. China's per capita GDP is still a quarter or a fifth of Canada's, right? It's still not actually particularly high. I think it's only like 8, 9, 10,000 per person GDP per capita. So there are, of course, pockets of China that are quite wealthy, Shanghai, Beijing, maybe, but big swaths of the country are still quite poor, certainly by Canadian standards. But we've gotten this realm of geopolitical competition, and that's what Andrew Coyne is highlighting. Peace Quest, which is Stephen Staples' organization, a sort of anti-war organization in Canada. In their email send out over the weekend, they offer a book to people donating if the book is The Peace, A Warrior's Journey by former General Romeo Dallaire. So Peace Quest is offering a book by Romeo Dallaire to anyone who donates. I have a whole section in my book, Left, Right, Marching to the Beating of Imperial Canada, about Romeo Dallaire that's a 2018 book. Romeo Dallaire is somebody who promotes NATO, promotes increased military spending, promote bombing Libya, promote intervening in Haiti, on and on and on and on. This is somebody, and of course, most importantly, he is somebody who has greatly enabled Paul Kagame, the brutal dictatorship in Rwanda that has caused mayhem in the Congo over the past 30 years. Not to mention invaded Rwanda in 1990, fought violent, brutal war for multiple years in conquering Kigali. This is somebody, he also fought, he was involved in ousting 3 different governments. The Ugandan government in 86, he was part of the NRM, Kigali in 94, and then Mobutu Kinshasa in 96. So this is somebody who has just been incredibly violent. And Dallaire, until today, continues to be very close to Kagame and really upholding the Kagame kind of myth. But here we are in 2024, and Peace Quest, supposed to be like an activist, anti-war organization in Canada, promoting the book of a Canadian general. It's actually really unbelievable. It speaks to how deeply tied to the mythology of Canada, how really, quite honestly, I'll just put it in phrase, they're racist, right? I mean, this is just racism to have such like indifference to Africa and Africans, and somebody like Dallaire, who's been, what Congolese refer to as the Hitler of Africa, and Dallaire has done so much to prop him up. To be so indifferent, ambivalent, ignorant of Romeo Dallaire in 2024, it's just absolutely not acceptable. And quite frankly, anybody who's has any connection to Peace Quest and Stephen Staples should tell him about this. He knows this. I'm sure he's seen some of my writing on Dallaire over the years. This is not the first time. I've had conversations with Stephen Staples going back years, decade plus. He was into the Haiti in promoting peacekeeping after 2004. He wrote this report for the Council of Canadians about the Council of Canadians foreign policy, all about promoting peacekeeping. And after Canada was part of this UN mission that had overthrown the government of Haiti, while the UN occupation of Haiti, Canada's right in the center of it, and lauding UN peacekeeping, even mentioning Haiti in a positive light. So this is just a further confirmation of I don't know what, and really, what they're saying is just like, I guess, the decrepit nature of peace activists, how nationalistic myth making they are regarding these things. Sorry, I had some kids making a lot of noise in the background there. On a more positive note, there was the people in Ottawa were able to shut down the CanSec Arms Fair on Monday. They had a very big demonstration in the morning, very early in the morning. They were able to postpone it. I understand that a handful of people were arrested. There's this horrible image of this arms guy from Switzerland knocking this Muslim woman who has a hijab on, like hitting her hard in the face, knocking her down. I guess he was angry with her for protesting. It's not exactly clear what was going on. So on the more positive side, there was a really strong anti-war, pro-Palestinian, anti-militarist mobilization on Monday morning in Ottawa against CanSec, the big arms bazaar. I saw a story today about an audio documentary delves into dark Cold War chapter of Canada's LGBT purge. And it's all about the military. Well, it's not all about, it's this big long series. But a part of it is about the military's anti-gay policies that were important for the military for multiple decades. They kind of continued right until the early 90s. But in the 60s, the military and Gary Kinsman and does this, publishes details this in his book, Canada's War on Queers, I believe it's called. they come up with working with the Carleton University, the early 60s. They come up with what they call a fruit machine, which is supposed to be like some scientific method of documenting, uncovering gay people, and then they were going to kick them out of the military. It was like testing and all this kind of stuff. Anyways, that's some interesting history of the Canadian military. I cover a bit of it in my my military book, A Stand on Guard for Whom. On the note of the Canadian military, Bill Blair posted yesterday, or maybe it was the day before, it was either Saturday or Sunday. He says, on Canadian Armed Forces Day, we celebrate our outstanding military personnel who work tirelessly to defend the values of peace, freedom, and democracy. Right? That's what the Canadian military does: peace, freedom, and democracy. Of course, tell that to the people of Afghanistan, of Libya, of Yugoslavia, of Iraq, that they were defending peace. As the military's role in the LGBT purge, it's never been really an institution of defending democracy at home. If you look at its role in suppressing strikes for decades and decades, the militia's role suppressing opposition to World War I and the draft. There's a whole history of the military, obviously indigenous. The military has often been just a tool of the wealthy and powerful against democracy and expanded civil liberties and the like. But the mythology is very powerful. Also, there were stories about a unknown soldier begins his journey home from World War I to Newfoundland. So, people who were killed during World War I, who bodies never found. And here you are 110 plus years later, 100, I guess, 8 years later. There's this whole big kerfuffle in the media about these unknown soldiers being brought back. It's a huge ceremony, and it's a really emotional thing. And of course, like World War I is just kind of like ignored in all this. It just plays into martial patriotism and the like. And on that note, there's this push for increased military spending that got really going with the U.S. senators, 23 of them signing a letter to Prime Minister Trudeau about increasing military spending in Canada. And the National Post published this interview where Lawrence Stevenson, this wealthy Canadian who was a former soldier, and he's complaining about Canada. You are freeloading. And this Americans are putting pressure, and we're really embarrassed. These American senators are putting pressure on how we stop freeloading on the Americans and pull our weight in military affairs and increase our spending to 2% of GDP. And the NATO is embarrassed by us and all this brouhaha. The Globe Mail in Saturday's editorial was, it's time to boost up defense. Again, they repeat the senators, U.S. senators, calling for 2% GDP spending on military. The Saturday Globe also has this big, long piece in the front of the opinion section titled, Who Will Fight Tomorrow's Wars? And it's actually putting on the idea of conscription and saying how there's picking up talk about conscription in a bunch of European countries, many of them which actually had conscription until not that long ago. I think Sweden in 2010 ended it, France in 97 or something like that, the Americans, I think, in like 72. And he goes through all this whole thing about conscription. And basically, we might need to really have this conversation in Canada about introducing conscription. Now, this is I think crazy talk. I don't think politically it's on the agenda in any sort of short, medium term, but it shows you just like where they're going, where the militarists are going, and how emboldened they are right now. They're just so emboldened. And really at the crux of it, of course, is the proxy war. And that's a big part of this big, long Globe piece, the proxy war. And Russia's about to take all of Europe and the like is kind of raised. And what's going on there is very, very troubling. I mean, it's escalating very quickly, and it's stunning, quite honestly. You have the Canadian government. I think on Wednesday, Melanie Joly says, Ukraine can attack Russia with Canadian weapons. So she's, comes in pushing that line that at that point the US and Germany weren't saying. Presumably this was also coordinated. Then Germany, the US have now come on and saying you can use our weapons in Russia, at least parts. It's in around the Kharkiv region, the Belgrade region, I guess, of Russia. And I think initially, but it's all setting up to anywhere in Russia. That's now we're moving towards that. The Russians, of course, are responding by saying this is escalating things, which I think it is escalating things, and then they're doing the threats around nuclear stuff. The Ukraine hit or struck one of Russia's early warning nuclear weapons facilities, and I don't understand the technical stuff of this at all. But I watched an interview with Jeffrey Sachs, where he says he got a letter from the preeminent expert on this stuff within the US. And he's like, this is crazy stuff. This is like, the Russians could think it's an error. They could think they're being hit. This is totally escalating and bringing on the possibility of nuclear kind of strikes. This is where it's going. And we're just continuing down this path with, it's open. We can blow up in Russia. The Ukrainians are hitting nuclear early warning systems in Russia. RT apparently published an editorial calling for Russia to use a demonstrative nuke, saying that the US has crossed all their own red lines. Now we have to set our own red lines. So now they're talking about using nukes in I guess a demonstrative nuke. I don't really know what that means, but using that in Ukraine. This is not at all where we want to be going, and this is escalating quickly, and it takes on a life of its own, where there's no one, even if Joe Biden doesn't really want to go to the next phase, there's no ability to rein things back. So this is very troubling, and the Canadian government has been right at the center of escalating things in Ukraine. And now the French, of course, are talking about troops. Apparently they're saying they're about to sign an agreement to start training, have more French troops in Ukraine to train Ukrainians closer to the front line. Shifting gears to the horrors in Gaza, which are continuing. I saw this interview with this French expert on mortality in conflicts, and he's basically saying that it's almost for sure. He estimates about 60 to 65,000 Palestinians have been killed directly by the Israelis over the past 8 months, and the official number is at 36. And then about 12 or 13,000, I think they say, are under rubble, presumed dead. So that would put it at 48, 49,000. But he's basically points out that since January, the count has just dropped drastically. And the reason he's saying is because basically the ability to count, because they destroyed all the hospitals. And so the ability to catalog the deaths has been greatly undermined. And so he says that Israel is still dropping about 300 bombs a day. And so he says at a really macro level, the estimate would be about one person killed per bomb dropped, which would be putting at 300 a day, which gets to his tally of 60 to 65,000. I don't know if this is correct, but certainly the idea that the authorities' ability to count in Gaza has been drastically undermined or destroyed. It makes sense to me when all the hospitals are being destroyed and the civil infrastructure has been destroyed. So I guess we won't know a final tally. And then obviously the more and more stuff about the famines in parts of Gaza. And obviously they just announced, they're saying more than 1 million people have been driven out of Rafah. Those are people mostly who had already been driven to Rafah. Sometimes the 5th time they've been driven somewhere. So like forcing 1 million people to flee is an incredibly horrible thing. But the onslaught continues. Now, it reported the government released that they sold $30,641,000 in weapons goods to Israel last year, biggest ever, or certainly known of in recent decades. And Maharar has a thing on Twitter about the bomb that was used in Rafah a week ago, the GBU 39, and he points out there's this Canadian company that may have designed the tail kit for this bomb that I guess blew up, killed 45 or whatever it is exactly in the tents in Rafah. The Maple has a story about after October 7, and then when Canada was evacuating people from Israel, and we knew this, that they were bringing in Israeli soldiers, flying them back into the country. And the story points out, got some access information. Title is Military Official, quote, mistakenly told to expect Israeli troops on flight. And he was told to expect, quote, 70 plus IDF and critical professional on board a charter flight. Now, the Canadian government is now claiming this is all a typo. So that yes, this document was circulated, but it was a typo. And Alex Kosh from the Maple points out that, like in a whole bunch of other correspondence, there's no sign that there was any hint that this was a typo made previously, but now the PR people are trying to say that, we didn't actually send Israeli soldiers back in. We weren't like funneling them back in to get them ready to attack Gaza. In fact, it was just a little typo in our communiques. Very unlikely. Now, the Shri Paradkar, the Toronto Star columnist, who is really at the best end of the dominant media, and she gets really attacked from the Zionists, all these racists. They really pick up on her, a woman of color. They really attack her for any expressions of support for Palestine, and I think just attack her kind of more generally. So she has this piece in the Toronto Star, headline, Ottawa's waffling on Gaza makes commitment to human rights look shaky. And she says, the opening paragraph thing says, the Trudeau government's politics of appeasement rather than those of principle have made its reaction to developments in the Middle East inauthentic to all sides of a divided populace. And her piece is not quite as bad as the headline or the opening paragraph, but it gets too much into this idea that they just haven't been principled and that they've sort of like done both sides. And like the fact that someone like her, who is definitely pro-Palestinian, the fact that she would write that, and I don't know if she fully believes that or if that's just, the framing she thinks she needs to do to get into the paper, but that's insane, right? Like the Canadian government has enabled this Holocaust in Gaza in so many ways. This notion that like it's just okay, yeah. Now the last like week or so, they've said like we don't like what happened. We want a ceasefire. We don't like what happened in Rafah and the tents. They said that they're claiming they haven't okayed any new arms permits since January, though that's all very fuzzy, right? Because there's like a couple hundred permits that were in the already being processed, and doesn't seem like they stopped any of that, but they weren't accepting new ones. And we're not even 100% sure that, not to mention all the weapons going through the bigger part of Canadian weapons to Israel, which go through the US, or Israeli weapons to Canada, and a series of things like that. But so this is the kind of framing, and so I'm doing this piece. I started thinking about doing this piece before reading her piece, and it just kind of confirmed to me. It's basically the 100 things Canada could do. I don't know if it's going to be titled that to stop enabling the genocide, or that proves that highlights that it's complicit in the genocide in Gaza. and I'm not at 100 yet, but I've got about 30 or 40 down, and there like it's an endless stream of things that that the government could do easily. I mean, there's all these simple things like charities question. I'm going to get to that in more detail a little bit later, so maybe leave that. But that's the biggest, my opinion, the biggest contribution to Palestinian dispossession, the whole charities question. There's, of course, the special advisor to protect Israel from criticism. We got this, public Deborah Lyons, just a genocide promoter on the public dole, essentially to fight anti-Semitism. IHRA definition, get rid of that. Support UN resolutions that almost the whole world support. Recognize Palestine. Why is more than 10% of Canada's terrorism list a country or occupied place that's like 0.3% of the world's population? So all these Palestinian groups have been demonized, put on the terrorist list. Can either eliminate the terrorist list or remove all or most of the Palestinian groups, and even Canadian IRFAN, the Canadian group that's because they were supporting orphans in Gaza, and the money went through the health the post office, which was run by Hamas, and then they were supporting health ministry. So the terrorist list. Obviously, everything to do with the weapons question, the Foreign Enlistment Act. Why won't ministers to state that any Canadian fighting in the Israeli military or anybody recruiting for the Israeli military could be liable to be investigated in Foreign Enlistment Act? There's all these dozens, 100, I think I can get up to 100 different ways, and pretty straightforward ways of Canada either making it clear it doesn't support the genocide or stopping enabling the genocide. So this whole framing of we're sort of like we're taking both sides, and it's craziness, and Mexico just joined the ICJ, joining Chile and Turkey and Egypt, and I think some other countries that are supporting the case that South Africa brought. Well, Canada could join that. It's not logistically difficult. I mean, it's incredible. It's way outside of bounds in our political realm. They're not even, they're condemning the International Criminal Court for looking into Israeli officials' war crimes. So that's at the liberal left end of the dominant media. But then at the crazy end of the dominant media, you have Saturday's National Post. The front page is titled, "In Israel, it's still October 7th." and it's all about how it's all the poor Israelis, all they can think about is October 7. Time has stood still for 8 months, and nothing else has happened. It's just October 7, and it's just all the horrors that happened to Israel, and how dare we think of anything else but October 7th and the horrors. Well, more Palestinians were killed on October 7th than Israelis were killed. Let's just put that out there, right? On the day of, there were more Palestinians, were many Palestinians killed, 1,000 plus Palestinians who entered Israel, who were killed. So even if you look at stuff like that, and it's that's the crazy end, which is of course the Toronto Star is not the dominant end of the media, and so that's where we're at. They on the ICC thing, I just want to point out there was a letter signed by 375 scholars, lawyers, other former politicians, even Alan Rock and Lloyd Axworthy signed it, saying that Canada should unequivocally support the ICC. And I'll get to Axworthy and Rock in a second here. On the flip side to that, you have Erwin Kotler denouncing his buddy. He's buddies with Karim Khan, the ICC chief prosecutor, and he brought Karim Khan here a year ago to Ottawa, and he's really complaining as an op-ed, all complaining about how dare Karim Khan investigate Israeli officials. The racism that's come with some of this, which is picking up. I mean, it's been going on, but it's really picking up here. The racism that coming with the well, on the Palestine question, on the refugee question, but also on the anti-Semitism question. So Doug Ford, the Premier of Ontario, after a school was shot at, I believe in North York, a Jewish school was shot at. No one, it was at night, no one was hurt, but nonetheless, totally odious thing to do. We don't know kind of anything about it. in Montreal, I just should say, I don't know if I mentioned this, but just about 2 weeks ago, somebody was finally detained for the shooting at a Montreal school back in November, which is interesting. And but so we don't know what's going on. But Doug Ford basically said it's immigrants. It's immigrants that shot at the Jewish school, and so he really used this to, double down on his anti-immigrant. Now, and Doug Ford's done this a bunch. He's done this about a few years. The NDP came out with these things, statement 2011. Immigrants come here and they go on the dole and they take our money and they whatever kind of statement like that. And there's another one, 2023, not to do with Israel, not to do with ostensibly combating anti-Semitism, but he used that. And you're seeing this more and more in pro-Israel circles. Now, our good friend Jeremy Levy, the mayor of Hampstead, did that in response to Mark Miller, the immigration minister. He said Mark Miller should think long and hard about his policy decision to increase the immigration of people from Gaza from 1,000 to 5,000. This picture was not taken in Gaza. It's from Montreal. It shows people like in a Palestinian kind of outfit. Looks like they're supposedly like Hamas people. And there's kids in there. They got like keffiyeh on. This supposed to be saying they're like Arab terrorists. That's what he's trying to get at. Shows a picture of this. He said the children are wearing Hamas uniforms. I don't believe that's not actually correct, but don't import. And then he says don't import more hatred, right? So importing hatred is people opposing Israel's genocide, going to demonstrations. So that's the mayor of Hampstead. And now Rebel News actually has a petition, and it says no Gaza refugees. Public opinion polling of Gazans show that the majority of them support Hamas's brutal October 7 rape and murder massacre against Israeli civilians. Please sign our petition opposing Justin Trudeau's move to resettle them right here in Canada. So they're really ramping up this anti-immigrant Palestine protest kind of thing. And Mayor Levy is doing that. And Rebel News is doing that. Doug Ford, in a slightly different dynamic, is doing that. Mayor Levy of Hampstead posted this message from Nikki Haley, the Republican presidential candidate who went to Israel and signed a bomb to be dropped on Palestinian children, saying "finish them." That's what she signed on the bomb. And Mayor Levy was really excited about that. He retweeted that and giving a sense of where he's at in his genocidal promotion. It was pointed out that Haley received $230,000, I think, US dollars. One thing I saw, I said US dollars. One thing I saw, I said Canadian dollars. I'm not sure. To speak in Montreal in December 2022 by CJ. Right, just to give a sense of where some of her ideas may come from on this question. So she's been paid, in this case, at least by huge sums by main pro-Israel lobby group in Canada. On the note of this incredible pro-Israel kind of frenzy in Canadian political life, you have the Toronto James Pasternak, the city councillor, who said, happy to welcome Israeli Special Ambassador Ronan Gilor, Consul General in Toronto Shamir Idit, and Deputy Consul General in Toronto Ashani Asule to City Hall. We were joined by Councillors Brad Bradford, Mike Coley for a productive meeting on Canada-Israel relations. So Toronto City Hall is making sure they had a productive conversation on Canada-Israel relations. So that's where we're at with the Toronto, and this is not long after we raised the Israeli flag at Toronto City Hall and Ottawa City Hall and Vancouver and the like. So our city councils are ensuring that they have productive conversations on Canada and the state committing a Holocaust in Gaza. I think I may have mentioned this last week. I don't remember, but. Ali Abu Nima posted after the horrible tent massacre and the Palestinian children with their heads wiped off, and he posted an image and a tweet about it, and he said, where's all these people promoting responsibility to protect? Where are they when it comes to Gaza? And it's important, right? Like, this was responsibility to protect doctrine, this idea that when there's mass human rights violations taking place, it's the responsibility of the international community to intervene over and above considerations of state sovereignty, to end the horrors, end the massacres, end the genocides, end the Holocaust, end the suffering. So that's the idea. And they invoked that to justify destabilizing and military intervening in Haiti, 2004, at a fairly low level. And they really, really rammed that up with Libya in 2011. And Lloyd Axworthy, the former Canadian Foreign Affairs Minister, who instigated the responsibility to protect doctrine process after, because it comes out of the humanitarian intervention idea of bombing Yugoslavia in 99, and then they pushed this to actually turn it into doctrine of responsibility to protect. And they forget the name, the International State Sovereignty, International Commission on State Sovereignty. And Canada pushed this to the UN structure, and then 2005 tried to push it at the UN. And a main player in all this was also Alan Rock, who was Canada's ambassador, I believe, at the UN when pushing this, and I think he was an attorney general at some point as well. And Alan Rock and Axworthy were all over in 2011, and even after 2011, I think even still publishing it into 2012, citing responsibility to protect and Libya and justifying NATO's invasion of Libya and stuff like that. Now, they've all stayed completely silent on responsibility to protect and Gaza, of course. And you can't come close to anything that Gaddafi is accused of in 2011, or Aristide, even insane, not like accused of, that comes close to what Israel's been doing in Gaza. It's on a whole different scale, even the claims, let alone reality. And so they're just totally silent. They don't mention the responsibility to protect. And I've seen no one mention the responsibility to protect. And this is, all these liberal interventionist Canadians just can't go there, because responsibility to protect was never really about protecting those being, facing different violence or crimes, but it was more a way to justify providing a liberal cover for Western imperialism. But Alan Rock and Axworthy 2 weeks ago, they actually published a piece in Foreign Affairs titled "A UN Trusteeship for Palestine, a temporary fix that can lead to an enduring peace." So they're not calling for responsibility to protect, but instead they're calling for Palestine to be put under UN trusteeship, which is remarkable. Why wouldn't Israel be put under UN trusteeship? On a different note, the SFU Faculty Association had a BDS vote, and apparently it was hacked. It was hacked, and there was like huge numbers that voted. Presumably there's a pro-Israel hacking to bias the whole thing and to discredit the whole thing. On a more positive note, Toronto Metropolitan University, there was a couple dozen, I believe, law students in October published a public letter condemning Israel and sort of, I guess, justifying resistance's attack on October 7th. And it was a huge kerfuffle. The university claimed they were anti-Semitic. And there was a big investigation done by a former Chief Justice of Nova Scotia, who came out this week, exonerates the pro-Palestinian law students, says they were falsely accused of anti-Semitism. And the major player in pushing all this, there was 22 lawyers, prominent lawyers in Toronto, I think principally, including Howard Levitt, the National Post columnist, who's a total fanatic. I've talked about him many times. He was right at the center of this. So that's good that these lawyers, these law students, should I say, at Metropolitan University have been, in a sense, exonerated. On another more positive note, Nikki Ashton put out a really good statement on charities. She posted to X, and then she sent a statement to her email list, a fundraising appeal, actually, to her email list. She's the NDP's revenue critic, so she's responsible for Canada Revenue Agency stuff. And her statement was, the CRA must investigate Canadian charities funding Israeli military operations in Gaza and illegal Israeli settlements. Groups even blocked food aid from entering Gaza. Outrageous. Not 1 cent of Canadian tax dollars should be funding genocide. Now, if you actually read what she's saying in a I think what a correct way, but in a maximalist way, it's quite major political implications, because there's a whole lot of Canadian charities that are supporting that are funding genocide, that are supporting Israel. More than $250 million a year, hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars been raised over the past 7 or 8 months, added donations, and a lot of this money should be not allowed right now, according to CRA rules. And part of Nikki Ashton, I think she did this partly because of the Rafah massacre, the tent massacre, and the space that was opened up there, but also that the Canadian Foreign Policy Institute and Justice Advocates got about 3,000 emails to her as part of this United Israel appeal. There was a formal complaint documenting how United Israel appeal should be investigated by the Canada Revenue Agency for violating CRA rules. United Israel Appeal has raised more than $1.5 billion since the early 90s. It raises between 50 and 100 million a year. And this is one of the big fishes. This is usually the biggest donor of charities to Israel. And so Nikki Ashton, I think, was feeling, she felt the pressure. She felt that there's people backing this issue. It's putting on the radar. And so she put out the statement, and it appears that she's going to be doing more on this issue in coming weeks, which is very good. This is really important. This is a big breakthrough, because there's been very little discussion about this matter, even though, again, I think it's the most important Canadian contribution to Palestinian dispossession. The Gazette reported on the fact that this group that organizes the annual Israel Walk in Montreal, it's been a registered charity since 2009. Basically, all it does is organizes this pro-apartheid or pro-genocide walk, and it's a registered charity. So once you start getting into this realm, it's just amazing what's going on here, and the subsidies flowing, how much money there is, and so much of this should just not exist. I mean, I think there's a big question about whether the whole registered charity thing should exist, nothing to do with Israel. I think it's mostly a way for wealthy people to get basically be subsidized to do what they want to do politically or socially and stuff like that. So I think probably the whole charity thing, registered charities, we should eliminate that whole question. But specifically around Israel, it's quite a damaging domain. And this has been going on for a long time. The money being wealth transfer since 1967, when registered charities, 57 years of this huge subsidy by all Canadian taxpayers. Also, on the more kind of positive note, here in Quebec, Quebec Solidaire is really pushing hard against the Quebec Israel office that the CAQ government are trying to set up, or have set up, and just in recent months. Also, Bloc Québécois, on Wednesday, they put out a 10-point statement, what should happen for Canada to stop sort of contributing to the genocide. It's not amazing. It's sort of like the NDP March 18 resolution, but it's the fact that they're raising it, and it broadly they go in the right direction, the demands. At UQAM, the Université Québec à Montréal, they had the encampments coming down. They got the administration to agree to some stuff, which is decent with regards to no arms companies, no relations to Israel. They don't really have any relations, and they say they're not invested in arms companies. Put up some money for Palestinian academics, Palestinian students to come. There's a couple other things in there. Some statements. They also say, though they don't have relations with Israeli universities now, that they won't build relationships to any universities that could be viewed as like violating international law. which doesn't say that Israel's violating international law, but it's kind of implied, and so implicitly they wouldn't be allowed to start any relationship with Israeli universities because they probably engage in things that violate international laws. That's the language kind of question. I certainly salute those who've been into the camp now for weeks. Obviously you want, as part of their demand, initial demands was to end the Quebec-Israel office. And obviously UQAM doesn't have the power to do that. But that was a bigger demand that was difficult to attain. Obviously, you would want that to happen as well. But I definitely think it's been an effective protest, and certainly everyone involved should be saluted. At the Université Laval in Quebec City, there was a Palestine encampment set up, I think on Friday or Saturday, and the cops came in right away and took it down. So that's interesting. So they're still popping up. There's still new ones popping up, which is pretty awesome. At U of T, we're seeing the Toronto police taking the position of Montreal police. So you have the U of T administration demanding repression, and Toronto police is saying, well, we're not really seeing anything that justifies it, which is you have a situation where the administrations are more odious than the police services in their position. So that's troubling and speaks to where these university administrations are at, or some of them at least. There was a effigy of Netanyahu hung up in I guess he's in like a prison gown at McGill, and the pro-Israel students made this huge crying in the Montreal Gazette. McGill students horrified by hanging in effigy. I mean, come on, like how many demonstrations you've had politicians hung in effigy, and then he's in a prison gown, but of course this is a Nazi, this is the Holocaust, this is what they forced Jews in the concentration camps to wear, kind of. So they tried to like frame it as. That's I guess maybe to be expected. The policing of pro-Palestinian, or it's just unbelievable how uniquely policed every different language question, every different little act, sign, whatever. Here in Montreal, we on our 35th weekend in a row of mass protests, it was more than 2,000 that marched on Saturday. Very big, much bigger than the recent weeks. That was really good. A very good sign. I guess I'll share this video, and then I will. Minister Miller, Madame Brendian, your government has enabled the Holocaust in Gaza. Your government responded to Israel's massacre by increasing weapons permits. Your government sent Israeli soldiers back amidst Israel's massacres in early October. Your government sent solidarity missions to Israel. Diplomats sent solidarity missions to Israel. Your government and you as minister have demonized Palestinians. Your government has enabled continued registered charities to send money to the Israeli military. But you want to turn out the light? Why don't you respond? There's a mother of a 13-year-old outside whose daughter was killed in Gaza because of Israel's siege and a slaughter. It's genocidal policies, and you just don't want to respond. This is the mother of a 13-year-old who was killed in Gaza a few months ago, in part because of your policies. What? You want to respond? Sorry, I hit the end too early on that. Anyways, that was me challenging Rachel Brendian, who you might see early on in it. She's a Liberal MP, very pro-Israel Liberal MP. Mark Miller, who you see well, and Guilbeault. And just before that, the the mother who I was mentioning, whose daughter was killed in January, 13-year-old, because she wasn't able to access the medicine that she needed because of the Israel's onslaught. She confronted Miller and Guilbeault, mostly Miller because he's the immigration minister, as they were walking towards the press conference. They were planning on doing their press conference outside, but when she came with one other person, two other people, they then just moved the press conference inside. They didn't think we find out where their location was, and good story of how we found out the location, but I won't say it publicly. And then they moved inside, and then I went in, and you saw that I was able to get in, and I was very happy with myself how I got in. I kind of melded in with these journalists, got in and did that, and then was obviously kicked out. And then we were making so much noise by the front where they had moved the press conference just inside this building, and we're making so much noise there. Then they had to move the press conference a second time and put it like way at the front. And then we actually figured our way over to another door and kept making noise. We couldn't see what was going inside. But I've never been involved. I don't think I've been involved in making the move a press conference twice because of protesters. So that was kind of cool. Yeah, so I think I'll just leave it at that. I've probably gone on too long. And if Laura wants to help out with moderation, that'd be great. I'm having some make you co-host and unmute you, and if you have a question or go ahead or whatnot.
Oh, okay, now I'm unmuted. It's not a question. I just wanted to point out something because you were talking about BDS and you've talked about it in the past, and you had some doubts about how effective it could be, even though you support it. But I was listening to a good interview today with the head of a Muslim finance organization, and he was talking about, while he says you're right, probably in terms of directly impacting the economy of Israel, but or those companies, but what he was saying is, as long as people are not just boycotting, but are writing to all those companies explaining why they're boycotting, and he said you get a public momentum, and he thinks that that can influence an investment climate in that company, and so that company then becomes afraid to invest in Israel. And that I got evidence of that today. Pret a Manger, which is a very famous chain of food stores in Europe, they were supposed to open up 50 outlets in Israel, and it was announced today that they're not doing that, and they've been the target of a BDS campaign. So that may be something where they have affected a business decision. Of course, it could be the general unrest going on in Israel right now too. But anyway, so that was a positive way, and it's called the Muslim Thinker. But it was interesting hearing him talk about how BDS can have an impact. But don't just boycott. Make sure you're writing the companies to let them know why you're not taking their business there anymore. That's all.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. I mean, obviously the university stuff is structured around divestment stuff, which is the D and BDS. So that's I certainly agree with that. And as we've seen with Starbucks and McDonald's, they've been hit very hard. And the business press has talked all about that, but mostly because of the boycotts in Arab and Muslim countries, not because of any boycotting happening in North America. So I don't. I totally agree that if you're gonna be boycotting, you need to have a communication forum as well. It's got to be made clear why, like that's a really important piece to having any sort of impact.
Yeah, and by the way, I just wanted to tell you, when you play your videos for us showing the disruptions, did you know we hear your voice, but the video doesn't play?
Oh, I didn't know that. Really?
No, yeah, we just hear your voice.
And that's always been the case, or that was just today?
That's been the case for a long time.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, just to let you know.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, I don't see any other hands raised. Does anyone else have any questions, or we're all good? Everybody? Oh, you're okay. Go ahead. Okay, Yuri, sorry, I'll unmute you. Can you unmute Yuri? Okay.
Yes, actually, Eve, I was actually going to actually mention that for some reason every time you've shown your disruptions via Twitter, in that it only we can only hear your voice, never
Oh,
shows
sorry.
the actual thing. So I think I would suggest in the future, if that still is the problem, just like when you do upload onto YouTube, just yeah, have like a link of like where we can watch it just in case.
Yeah.
So apologies for that. But yeah, I wanted your thoughts, Eve, on AMLO and the victory of Claudia Scheinbaum. I hope I'm pronouncing her name, of Morena, the left wing party. Is this yet another rebuke of Canadian imperialism under Justin Trudeau? And then a very quick question regarding Romeo Dallaire. Uh, I'm from the Congo, where Rwanda wrecks havoc on my mother's country. And I have to ask this, like, when you, I mean, okay, like, people have to know that, like, Paul Kagame is doing horrendous things in Congo. Romeo Dallaire, as far as I'm concerned, still props up Kagame. How can people just stay so, if not ignorant, just stay so silent about Paul Kagame? The fact that Romeo Dallaire props him up. Why are people still even propping up Romeo Dallaire when, okay, if they don't know about his support for other imperial adventures, the fact that he doesn't consider like what's happened to Indigenous Canadians as genocide, murder and missing Indigenous women as genocide. Like, I'm curious your response on
Yeah,
that.
I mean, there's no reason to think that Romeo Dallaire is uh, a leftist, a progressive, and like there's just no reason for it whatsoever. I mean, it's because the I mean, it's because of anti-African. I mean, right? It's like he tried to help the genocide. Like it's just because of like a racist desire to frame Canada as benevolent. That, like, if you just scratch the surface of Romeo Dallaire, he was a general of the Canadian military. He is on record promoting NATO. He wants more military spending. He support bombing Libya. He sort of supported the Iraq War in 2003. His messaging there's a little bit kind of, he supported Afghanistan. There's no reason he doesn't oppose the Holocaust in Gaza. There's no indications ever, right? Like, and so
He also supported non-existent moderate rebels in Syria, right?
probably, yeah, and so the why would Peace Quest and Stephen Staples do that, right? You ask yourself that question. Well, I think one part of the question is the answer is that it's about positioning yourself with officialdom and the official discourse, and at some sort of official level, Romeo Dallaire represents this. We care about the world, we care about Africans and the whatever, right? And so that's part of it. Part of it is actual ignorance, though he can't really, like, it's willful ignorance, right? Because Stephen Staples is like not like he doesn't know, like he doesn't want to know anything bad about Romeo Dallaire. That's like that because it doesn't fit with the ideology that he feels that he should be that he should be promoting, whether it's good for him to promote or exactly how that formulation comes forward. I don't know. But no, it's egregious, and like lots of people, lots of like anti-war people like donate to Peace Quest, right? It still sucks up money, right? I've been writing about this, like Peggy Mason at Stephen Staples was part of that with the Rito Institute and Ceasefire and stuff like that. And there's like ebbs and flows. Like I think Peggy Mason has gone like way better on Palestine of recent. Still kind of stuck like in you know, a lot. I mean, she's a former Canadian diplomat and stuff like that. But it reflects a big problem among foreign policy, the sort of supposed left or liberal elements of foreign policy where they're at. I don't know. I don't know what to. Yeah, it's very troubling and unfortunate.
Can I ask a quick
Oh, and
follow-up?
what you know with the Mexico, you know, I don't know, but I think it's a good thing. I think her victory is a good thing. I don't think it's, you know, sort of like earth shattering kind of. I don't think she's, you know, serious, like, you know, she's not some revolutionary or whatever. She's going to be a you know, reformist social democrat that sort of positions a foreign policy you know, less pro-US. But
Has Canada been undermining AMLO at all, or has that mostly been a U.S. activity?
there's been a bit of that stuff going on with the mining stuff, and Canadian diplomats are supporting mining, and then there's some lawsuits around the nationalization of or renationalization of some of those energy. I think it's is it TransCanada? The Canadian pipeline company is like huge, billions and billions in pipeline stuff in Mexico, and I think that mostly comes out of the privatization of the energy sector that happened 8 years ago in Mexico, 10 years ago, not that long ago. And AMLO, a big part of his project was, you know, reversing that nationalization kind of energy policy.
And just very quickly, do you think in the future, it's probably not the best time to bring this up now, but with a lot of the Palestine solidarity things, there has to be, you know, a point in time where we push back a little bit against some of the narratives that people say about Palestine, like we need to free the Palestinians, and we also need to free the Uyghurs from China. And there was a video going around about somebody who, somebody who claimed to be a survivor of the Rwandan genocide and was sort of pushing like the official storyline of that, which I have a big problem with, because that justifies, you know, Paul Kagame's it justifies Paul Kagame's raison d'etre, which is nonsense, and his ongoing Holocaust in Congo. So do you think like one of these days that we have to push back against some of the, you know, narratives of global solidarity when it comes to Palestine?
I totally agree. I mean, the point of that piece I wrote a week ago or so about the deflection, and there's Zionist groups trying to deflect with Sudan, and that the point is that we don't focus on international crimes in an equal way. We should be very upfront about that. I don't claim to. I politically, I focus the emphasis on where the Canadian government, Canadian political life, Canadian political culture is enabling those crimes. So I don't think the Uyghur question, I don't think there is a genocide taking place in Xinjiang. And I don't think,
likewise,
and I don't think that but even if I did, it's not equated with what Israel's doing in Gaza, because Canada is supporting what Israel's doing. There has been no House of Commons resolution calling it a genocide, right? Like, unlike the Uyghur question. So yeah, I think that's no doubt. Like, this is a total absurdity for anyone to say like, oh, that's how some of the Palestine solidarity milieu responds to these like deflections by Zionist groups and saying, no, we also care about Sudan, we also care about whatever. And I don't say that at a personal level. I think people should like be, you know, like global, but at a political level, no. We're like, where our government, our bombs, our aid money, our city halls that are raising the country's flag, like on and on and on and on and on. That's what we prioritize. Obviously, it's just total. It's a simple moral principle. It's not complicated whatsoever, and we shouldn't have any problem whatsoever in stating that absolutely upfront, straight out.
Also, I was just going to say, Yuri, you know, at some point in the past 7 months, the new president of Mexico put out a very good statement on Palestine, so that's hopeful.
Well, they're joining. They just announced they're going to join the join South Africa's case. about genocide. So they're, willing to push it a bit. And actually, people, there was big protest at the Israeli embassy last Tuesday, last Monday. They actually, it was quite I think they even chucked some Molotovs at it and stuff like that. So that got a bit of international kind of brouhaha.
So I think that's it, and I actually have to go anyway. So
Okay.
there's no more questions. So thanks everyone. Bye.
Aaron. Yeah.